We continue the Shir in Navi, Hebrew history. Last part of the story told about how Shaul HaMelech, King Shaul, had failed in his mission to eradicate, wipe out Amalek completely. Because of this, Shmuel HaNavi told him that he had lost his rights to royalty. He will no longer be king of the Jews, neither he nor his descendants. This had brought down the wrath, the anger of Hashem. And now Hashem said to Shmuel HaNavi, go immediately to the house of Yishai, and there you will select Yishai's son, anoint him as the king of the Jews. King meaning that the moment that Shaul HaMelech will pass away, Yishai's son will become king, will succeed him. The Torah says that Shmuel HaNavi was told this as an order. Hashem commanded him to go. Yet Shmuel HaNavi replied to Hashem, I'm afraid. How can I go? If I go to the house of Yishai to anoint his son as king, if King Shaul hears about this, he'll kill me. How can I go if my life is in danger? The Gemara says very strange, because Hashem commanded him. Hashem says go, that means Hashem will be with him. What risk was he taking? What possible danger could there be for him? And yet the Gemara says that Hashem's answer was, you are right. There is danger if he finds out, and therefore what you should do is take along an animal for a sacrifice, offer a sacrifice in that city, so it will look as though you came there to bring up the sacrifice instead of going there for the true purpose that you've intended. Now, why was Shmuel HaNavi afraid when the Gemara says that a person going on a mission, performing a mitzvah, is certain that he'll be successful, that nothing can befall him, no danger, no misfortune can befall him? Shluchei mitzvah einam nizaken. No harm can come to one who's on a mission of a mitzvah. The Gemara's answer is that if the place is a place where danger is prevalent, there's definite risk, a hazard at that place, then even the mitzvah itself cannot protect him. A person is not allowed to go into a fire and say, I'm wearing tefillin, I'll be saved. If there's a definite danger present, then the mitzvah will not protect him, and it is his duty to see to it that he does not jeopardize his own life. And that's what Hashem said to Shmuel the prophet. You are right. We must teach this lesson, that though you're performing a mitzvah, you're fulfilling the actual command of Hashem, still it is wrong to go to a place where there is definite danger involved. So he finally went. He came to the house of Yishai. Yishai was very happy to see Shmuel the prophet. Yishai was one of the outstanding people, not just of that generation, but of all time. The Gemara says that Yishai was one of the 4 people who never committed the tiniest sin in his lifetime. And therefore, if we say that a person dies because of a sin that is committed, Yishai should have lived forever. So that Yishai's death was due only to the fact that death was decreed upon mankind when the serpent committed the act of causing Adam and Chava to sin with the tree of wisdom. And this brought down a gezerah, a decree from Hashem, that no person will live forever, each person must die. That incident is what caused Yishai's death. So pure was Yishai. Yishai had 8 sons. Shmuel the prophet came into his house. He had not been told which son to anoint. He decided that he would judge for himself. So he asked Yishai, bring me your son. Son meaning the best one you have. Yishai brought out the oldest one. His name was Eliav. And Shmuel looked at him and he said, this must be the one, because he too, like King Shaul, was tall, very good looking, very impressive looking. And he said, this must be the one. And Hashem said to Shmuel the prophet, this is not the one. In fact, this one Hashem despises. It does not say Hashem does not consent to his becoming king. Hashem does not want him. It says Hashem despises him. Because Hashem said, you can only see with your eyes. A person can see with his eyes and no further. Hashem can see what's going in the heart. This was a sharp retort aimed at Shmuel the prophet, the Gemara says, because Shmuel the prophet, when he met Shaul HaMelech, King Shaul, the original time, when he first met him, asked, where is the seer? Where is the Navi? Shmuel the prophet answered, I am the Chazeh, I am the Navi, I am the one that sees. Hashem said, that's not the way to state it. This sounds like, it isn't of course, but it sounds like gaiva, like conceit. And therefore I'll show you that you say you are the seer, you cannot see. Here's a case where you think you see the proper one to be chosen as king, and yet you don't. Because this first son of Yishai, Hashem does not want him, and more so Hashem despises him. What was wrong with the son of Yishai that was so bad that Hashem actually despised him? The answer is that he possessed one quality, one trait of character that is so evil in the eyes of Hashem that not just Hashem dislikes it, but Hashem despises it. That is the characteristic of kas, anger, hot temper. This is something that is so evil that Hashem says, I do not want this person in my proximity. I don't want this person close to me. It is an evil that is so dangerous, so destructive. Arizal speaks about this, Arizal, that through kas, though the Gemara says that it's equivalent to idol worship, more so, when a person goes into a fit of temper, he actually rends asunder, tears apart his own neshama, destroys his own neshama to the point where even when he does a mitzvah subsequently, the mitzvah is not even absorbed by his neshama. The mitzvah goes to waste. It is given away for the wrong ends. Until that person does tshuva, he repents for this kas. Repents means that he definitely resolves not to go into this temper again. For this reason, we see that Eliyav, the son of Yishai, the firstborn, still, he was at a point where Hashem despised him because of this quality of kas. So, Shmuel HaNavi asked Yishai to send out his second son. He did this. He paraded 7 sons before him. Each one, he was told, this is not the one. Then he asked, is there anyone else? Yishai said, I have one more son, the youngest. He's out in the field. I shall summon him. It was then that King David came before Shmuel HaNavi, and he saw in front of him a youth, very bright-eyed, reddish complexion. Reddish, that might not be a compliment. The Zohar Kodesh says, why does the Torah use admoni, reddish? Some might like the color, red hair, but for a man, why use that term? The Zohar Kodesh says because this was simply meant to imply that the base, the foundation, and the fount of evil, the most evil person that ever existed, from which came forth Amalek, Edom, destruction of the Holy Temple, was Esav, who was called Red Edom when he was born. And here, King David came out as the one to combat Esau's evil forces. That is why he was called Admoni, and that's why he was a king in whose time there was no peace. He went out to battle all the enemies of the Jews until there was peace for his descendants. In the time of King Solomon, there was peace already. In the time of Mashiach ben David, there shall be peace, naturally. And so he saw that his brightness, his alertness, his purity, that he was the one that Hashem chose. Hashem said immediately, this is the one, anoint him, and he was anointed as future king. So at this time that suddenly the spirit of Hashem left King Shaul, he went into these depressive moods, sadness, marashara. He felt so badly that to elevate himself, to ease himself out of this evil despair, he asked for someone to come to play a musical instrument. The power of Nagina, of music, can soothe the nerves and soothe the soul. They suggested Yishai has a son, King David. Note we say the word King David because just as you're not allowed to call a rabbi by his name alone, especially to the King of the Jews, the eternal King of the Jews, because even Mashiach, the son of King David, will still be the son of the actual king. So we should always use the word David HaMelech, or King David, rather than just his name alone. So he was summoned to come before King Shaul, and he played the instrument, the kilo, which is a violin or a harp. In this manner he soothed the nerves of King Shaul. Each time that he got into one of these moods of despair, he was called to play before him. However, he did not stay in the palace continually. He was there only at certain intervals, and then he would go back home to his father to tend the cattle. Here again, the Zohar Kodesh says, note that the great tzaddikim, the fathers of the Jews, were so great and so holy, King of the Jews, King David, instead of it being written about them that they sat in the yeshiva, they studied Torah, or they worked on raising money for charity, they would go out and tend cattle. They were shepherds. Moshe Rabbeinu too also says he went to tend the cattle of his father-in-law. And of course, there are deep secrets involved in this topic of tending cattle, as in the case of Moshe Rabbeinu. The Zohar Kodesh says that these cattle contained the souls of the future students of Moshe Rabbeinu. He purified these cattle to a point where they became later his talmidim. That is, they evolved into Gilgal, into his talmidim, humans. Well, it's like creation, to elevate cattle to a point of humans. It's a deep topic. We will not penetrate that any further now. We hope to discuss it at some later date. Well, at this time, King David was at home. Suddenly, the Philistines mobilized their armies. Philistines were always the worst enemies of the Jews and the most powerful in the military sense. They gathered their armies, and they now faced each other, the Jews in a sort of a semi-helpless state compared to the armies of the Philistines, but willing to do battle. They had the courage. And they were on one side, on a hilly top, a mountain top. The Philistines opposite them also on a high range. The center was no man's land, where they would both come charging into this battle. These battles were always face-to-face confrontations. And this no man's land, the moment was empty, vacant, ready for the charge. Suddenly, out of the ranks of the Philistines came forth a giant, dressed from head to foot, very heavy armor plate. He walked out to the center of the area, the arena of battle, alone. He faced the forces of the Jews. He spoke up in a loud, booming voice. His name was Goliath. We use the term in English, Goliath. I'm sure he never heard of that name. He never called that. His name was Goliath HaPlishti. He was a giant. His height was 13 feet 6 inches. He'd make some basketball player. But this giant, this evil giant, is very powerful and very fierce looking. It is important to know his background. First, let's see his statement, and we'll find out who he really was. The amazing revelation in the Gemara about him. He walked out and he spoke to the Jews in a very authoritative tone. He said to them, speaking logically, there's a sense of these two vast armies and peoples coming out to battle each other, each one seeking a victory. The end of the battle will be that the victor will have lost large numbers of soldiers, of fathers, sons, husbands. What is the sense of that? He will then conquer the other nation, they'll become slaves to the victor. Why not settle the battle in a bloodless manner, just one person alone? Goliath alone challenged the Jews to offer. One single Jew came out and faced him in battle, winner take all. A battle to the death between these two. The winner will mean that his side will have taken as slaves the entire opposition. But this did not entail courage or heroism on the part of a person. Any person could walk out and say, I'm willing to die for my side. Dying alone was not enough. But you would walk out and say, I will challenge Goliath and die in this effort. It wasn't just himself that would be put to death. It would mean that he was handing over the entire Jewish people as slaves if he lost this battle. And that's why, this is the reason why Goliath challenged the king, King Shaul himself. You are the tallest, the bravest, the strongest. Come out and face me in battle. And of course, it says King Shaul was filled with fear, not because he was afraid to die or afraid to do battle, but if he should lose, it meant that he was handing the Jews over to defeat. Now Goliath, in offering this challenge, first spoke mildly. Then he said, I am not just an ordinary man. I am the one, he said, who had killed both sons of Eli the Kohen Gadol, the one who had captured the Holy Ark in this battle, and the one now who challenges the Jews and who also challenges the Jewish faith. And then he spoke against the Jewish religion, against Hashem, speaking in very derogatory terms, very insulting remarks. And the reason for this is, the Gemara says, that who was Goliath? Goliath, who was not challenging the Jews, who came out deliberately, despite the Jews, he came out in the morning at exactly the time they were supposed to say Kriyat Shema. He came out at night, repeating his challenge, also at the time of saying Kriyat Shema, to show that he defied their faith in Hashem Echad. He defied their faith in the Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, to stop them from saying Kriyat Shema at exactly the right time. Now there was destined to be a confrontation between Goliath and King David. Why so? Because these two were distantly related. Time, generations back, the time when Naomi went to the fields of Moab with her husband. They left the land of Israel, and her husband died. Her two sons married two sisters, the princesses of Moab, Ruth and Orpah. Her two sons died, and then she was left alone. She decided to return to Israel. Both of her daughters-in-law, Ruth and Orpah, offered to come back with her. She did everything in her power to dissuade them, tell them to remain because there was no sense in going back with her since she was impoverished. Ruth maintained a steadfast attitude that she wants to continue in the faith she had learned till now. She wants to be a Jew to the death and a Jew after death too. Orpah listened to the words of her mother-in-law and decided to return home, back to the king's palace, back to the king of Moab. And so Ruth followed Naomi to Israel in peace, came in peace, married Boaz, and had, as a descendant, 4 generations later, King David. Orpah went back on a road alone. On this road home, something happened to her, something very unpleasant. She was attacked by a band of men, wild ruffians, Graham, of course, and this lasted for a long period of time. There was a total of 100 attackers who molested her, Plus, the Gemara says, to add insult to injury, there was also one dog. So that, the Gemara says, here, in hint, the words of Goliath was born from that incident. So Goliath was the son of 100 men and one dog. This is why we can understand his statement later on. Meanwhile, Goliath gave this challenge to the Jews every day for a period of 40 days consecutively. 40 consecutive days representing his challenge to the Torah. The Torah was given from Har Sinai for 40 days. At this time, Yishai ordered his son, King David, who was unaware of what's going on, go to the battlefront and bring some food, a food package for your brothers. Also, take something from them. The Gemara explains what was requested by Yishai, something which played a very important part later on. It answers many questions later on. He came to the battlefront, and while standing there, he heard this Goliath walk out and offer this challenge. He was shocked. He started to speak to the soldiers nearby. How does this animal dare to come out and say things like this? Well, does everybody remain silent in a case like that? And they said, what can we do? So he asked, what does the king say? They said, the king says he has an offer for one who will defeat Goliath. King David said, I'm interested. What is his offer? So he offers three things. One, that the one who defeats Goliath will be made very wealthy from the treasuries of the king. Second, he will receive the king's daughter in marriage, and marry the princess. Third, his father's home, his family, will be exempt from taxes. King David said, that's a beautiful offer, I'm interested. Just then, his brother Eliav came out and saw King David, began to rant at him. What are you doing here? He said, I came to give you this food package. Eliav said, that's a lie. You came because you like to watch a sport. You want to see a battle. You're interested in seeing action, excitement. You don't belong here. This ranting was proof as to Eliav's hot temper. The Gemara shows why Hashem despised him. He also he screamed at King David to leave. King David did leave. He went to a different corner, walked around where he could not be seen by his brothers, and continued to discuss this offer of King Shaul, hinting at that he wants to be brought before King Shaul. He'd like to be the one to challenge Goliath in this battle. By the way, the item that Yishai asked King David to bring from his brothers, the Gemara says, was a get. A get is the Hebrew word for divorce. A divorce from their wives. This was a custom then, that all those going into battle should leave a divorce at home for the wife, so that in case they are missing in action, the wife is not an aguna. Aguna means a possible widow, a widow in doubt. She cannot remarry. She doesn't know if she has a husband or not. Secondly, if she has no children, she'll be spared the very unpleasant ordeal of chalitza, or yibum, which means a woman whose husband dies, she has no children, must marry her husband's brother or receive a special type of ritual divorce from him. But if she's divorced from him, from this husband, she avoids all that unnecessary unpleasantness. This is why every soldier going out to this battle had to give this divorce. As I said, it plays an important part later on. King Shaul heard about King David's questioning his offer, and he ordered King David brought before him. He saw King David, looked at him very closely. He had seen him before playing the musical instrument for him, but he never observed him that closely. And he said, you're only a boy. How do you figure you can go out into battle with this giant? let's be sensible. You're not going out to show what a hero you are. You're going to die in battle. There's no trick to that because you're jeopardizing the entire Jewish nation. What do you base your hope for success? King David said very simply, I base it on the fact that I am a shepherd. I tend my father's cattle. But while tending my father's cattle, I have had a lot of action that may be even more dangerous than facing Goliath. I was attacked by a lion once, and I defeated this lion alone. Afterwards, I had even a more dangerous battle with one who was stronger than a lion, and that is a bear. This is very revealing. The Gemara says this shows that bears are stronger than lions, by the words of King David. And this bear, too, I defeated. I killed. Now, how did I, a boy, succeed in killing a lion and a bear? The answer is obvious. I had Hashem help me. Now, just as Hashem helped me, rescued me from the hands of this lion and bear, and aided me to kill them, so will Hashem assist me in killing this dog. King Shaul thought about it and said, it's very logical. Fine. But I don't want you going out this way. I want you to put on armor plate, dress right, and take the necessary weapons. King David agreed, and he dressed King David with the shield and armor and sword of King Shaul. It was at this point that King Shaul's eyes began to burn, because by a miracle, King Shaul being much taller than King David, by a miracle this armor plate suddenly shrank and fit King David exactly, meaning implying that he was fit to be a king. King Shaul's eyes burned with envy. King David realized this. He took the spear, the sword, and he started to move. And as he moved, he said, I can't. I'm rooted to the ground. This is not for me. I'm not fit to wear this armor plate. It's too heavy for me and too good. I cannot wear this into battle. With this, he appeased King Shaul. He removed the armor, the sword, the spear. And King Shaul said, with what will you enter into battle? He said, I'll select my own weapons. He left. He ran out quickly. He collected 5 very smooth stones, pebbles from the beach, and a slingshot with these pebbles, and he carried a stick with him. And with this, he went out to do battle against Goliath. And we find one explanation for this in the Zohar Kodesh. He did kill Goliath with one of those pebbles using the slingshot. If one was enough, why did he take 5? What was the intent in having exactly 5 pebbles? The Zohar Kodesh answers that King David went out to prove that those words that Goliath used against the Jews in desecrating the Kriya Shema, the Shema Yisrael, those words would destroy Goliath. And so he selected 5 pebbles, each one standing for a word of the Kriya Shema, 5 for Shema Yisrael, Hashem, Elokeinu Hashem. The slingshot the container was Echad. With this, he went out to battle to counteract the evil of Goliath. He took along the cane with him, the stick, to mislead Goliath, thinking that he was going to use the stick in doing battle against him. He would not look or expect an attack with a slingshot. He came forth on the battlefield and he faced Goliath. Goliath saw King David, a boy. He let out a roar, and he said to him, a boy coming out to me with a stick? You think you're facing a dog? These words, he revealed unwittingly his true nature, his true background. And King David answered him, I come out of course, he started to insult again, to rave against the Jewish faith. King David replied, I come out to you without a sword, without a spear. I come out to you only in the name of Hashem, whom you have defiled, whose name you have defiled today, these 40 days. And you're going to see today that the victory is in the hands of Hashem, not in the hands of power or in the hands of military weapons. Today, you are going to die, and all your cohorts, your armies are going to fall victim, slaves to the Jews. When Goliath heard this, he lunged forward. Instead of retreating, King David ran forth, took out one of these stones, placed it in a slingshot, and let fly. Goliath's body was covered with heavy armor plate. It was only the part above his eyes, the forehead, that was bare, and there too was very solid. That's bone structure. A pebble could not do much harm coming from a slingshot. But the Gemara says that the aim was perfect. The stone struck directly at the center of the forehead, and at that moment a leprosy developed in the forehead so that it softened considerably. The pebble sank deeply into whatever is beyond that bone structure, whatever the vacuum was contained in his head, and he fell dead. But to show the concern, the consideration that heaven has for its tzadik, the Gemara says, the Midrash tells us that King David had to run forward to cut off Goliath's head. Now, to have to bother a tzadik to run so far, in heaven there was a miracle that Goliath, instead of falling backwards, one who was struck falls backwards. Instead he fell forward. That meant that King David had to run about 26 feet less than he would have had Goliath fallen backwards. 13 feet back and 13 feet forward. With 26 feet of running time he spared. He ran over to Goliath, pulled out Goliath's sword, and cut off his head, raised this head up, and marched back to the Jews and said, this is the head of Goliath, whom we are taking as trophy today. He held it up high. When the Philistines saw this, they were so broken morale that they, instead of just surrendering, they turned tail, began to flee. And with this, the Jews were filled with an urge to defeat in battle rather than to take prisoners. They pursued the Philistines, and they killed very large numbers of them, also conquering, taking over a lot of these cities that were taken from them previously. And so this entire incident ended with a tremendous victory for the Jews. One setback, of course, was that King Shaul, seeing this, was again filled with a deep fit of jealousy and despair, and that he could not have accomplished this. And here was King David, whom he suspected had some type of either royal blood or some plans to take over the kingdom. And so he asked his advisors, his commander-in-chief, his general was Abner, the general of King Shaul's army. Abner, the Gemara says, was extremely powerful. He's a very great person. In fact, Abner ben Ner was Zochar, for those who have visited Israel, visited the city of Hebron, the cave of four couples. Abner is buried directly opposite this cave of four couples, the grave of Abner ben Ner. The next to the king there was Abner, and also Doeg, one of the king's advisors. Doeg was an evil person. We'll see later on what part he plays with his evil. They asked Abner, who is this boy? Whose son is he? Of course, he knew him. He knew whose son he was. He had been playing music for him until now. But he wanted to know, is this boy fit to be a king? Does he have the requirements, the family background of becoming king? was then that Doeg, the evil one, spoke up and said to King Shaul, instead of asking whether he's fit to become king, why don't you ask whether he's fit to be called a Jew? Is he a Jew? And King Shaul was interested in that. Said, why do you ask that? What evidence do you have to the contrary? He said, well, I know that a child follows the religion of the mother. If there is intermarriage between non-Jew and Jew, the child follows the religion of the mother. In this case, I know that King David comes from the country of Moab. Moab, because his great-great-grandmother was Rus Hamoavi. There's a posek in the Torah that says, Lo Yovo, there cannot come into the ranks of the Jews anyone from the country of Moab. A non-Jew can convert, but Jews cannot accept Moabim as converts. Why? This was a curse placed upon them from heaven, because when the Jews were in the desert, they had pleaded with Moab to give them food and water, and Moab had refused. As a punishment, this decree was issued that no Moabi can ever convert into a Jew. So therefore, since he is a descendant of Rusa Moaviyah, he is not even Jewish. Avner, who was learned too, said, but I recall that there is a statement in the Gemara, mind you, in the Gemara. This is proof, of course, that the words of the Gemara were given to Moshe Rabbeinu, and that's how they knew these statements. Statement in the Gemara to the effect that when a posek says that no Moabite can convert, it says only a Moabite male, but a female is accepted. What is the reason? Because the sin, the crime of Moab was that they did not come forth to bring food to the Jewish soldiers there, the Jewish people. This is an act for men only. Women do not go out to greet strangers. So since the men were guilty, not the women, therefore a Moabite woman can be accepted as a Gioris, as a convert. Hence, King David is a legal Jew. Again, Doeg intervened and said, if your statement is true, just because the sentence says Moab, male, in that case, the Torah says, Lo Yovo Mamzer B'Kal Hashem, a Mamzer, a legal child, cannot become a Jew, cannot be accepted as a Jew to marry a Jewess. Why don't you say there too, that Mamzer male only, not Mamzeris? For this, Avner answered, the rule of Moab has a reason. It is only the men who committed a crime, and therefore women are exempt. Mamzer and Mamzeris are the same. There's nothing to separate, differentiate between the two. So Doeg said, well, even the reason, the logic you gave is still not sufficient. If the Moab men were guilty in not bringing out food to the Jews, the Moabite women were guilty in not bringing out food to the Jewish women. Then you cannot separate between the two either. At this point, Avner remained silent. He had no answer. So King Shaul, listening to this discussion, said to Avner, instead of discussing these laws with Doeg, this great chacham here, go to the Beis HaMedrash, go to the yeshiva, ask the rabbis of the Sanhedrin, let them determine the answer. And of course, the answer is, as the Gemara says, that Rus HaMoaviyah certainly could have converted. The female Moabites were accepted, and King David was legally 100% Jewish. According to this ruling, now the question was only, will he take over the kingdom? This is what King Shaul feared, and he devised a plan to eliminate King David. Let it be known to him that the king is anxious to have him as his son-in-law. He actually had promised, he who destroys Goliath will receive his daughter's hand in marriage, his older daughter Merav. He said, let King David go out and show his prowess, his might in doing battle against the enemy, and then with this he'll deserve to become the son-in-law of the king. This way King Shaul figured, send him out to the front lines. I wouldn't have to kill him myself. Let the enemy do so. And with this he promised too that he would give Merav, his daughter, to King David. When David went out to this battle, meanwhile, Merav, his daughter, was given to Adriel, a different person, in marriage. As we explained on Wednesday, the legal aspects were that the Kiddushin, the marriage between King David and Merav, was not valid, since it was based upon nothing being given. Kiddushin requires a ring or a coin, and here all that was given was just a loan, which is intangible, the amount that King Shaul owed to King David, the wealth he had promised. You cannot marry a woman with just a loan. You have to give something tangible, and therefore, since there was no marriage yet, Merav was given to Adriel. At this point, though, King Shaul's second daughter, the younger daughter, Michal, saw King David, and she fell very deeply for him. She desired him very strongly. Michal was the type, to bring a parallel, was like Rachel, the daughter of Kalba Savua, who was so pure that when she saw Rabbi Akiva originally, she recognized in him his greatness, was willing to marry him despite the poverty that it would mean for her. Here too, Michal, the daughter of King Shaul, was so pure and so holy that she could recognize in King David a greatness of a tzadik that she desired very intensely. And so she brought this to a point where King Shaul would offer her hand in marriage to King David. Again, King Shaul decided to make it difficult, and he said to King David, if you want my daughter Michal, and prove your mettle, prove your worth by bringing me 100 dead bodies from the Philistines. You must invade the land of the Philistines, kill 100 of the enemy, and then be burdened by having to carry back 100 dead bodies. It's much more difficult to carry back those bodies because then you're hampered. You can't put up a defense against any attackers. King David took his small band of followers, penetrated the lines of the Philistines, and brought back 200 dead bodies to show his ability, to show his desire to become the son-in-law of the king. So greatly was his respect for a Jewish king. One more word about Michal, though. Of course, this did not result in marriage either, as we explained on Wednesday, again due to legal difficulties. Temporarily, that is, Michal was given as a wife to Palti ben Loish. Palti ben Loish was a tzadik who realized that she was not really his wife. She belonged to King David, and so they were married in name only. They did not have any contact made whatsoever until we come to a later part of the story where she did return to King David as his wife. But Michal's purity was so great, and her loyalty to religion and faith so strong, that she defied even the orders of the top level authorities as far as Hebrew law was concerned. She practically authored her own law. She felt that women who are on a high level should not be put down. And therefore, despite orders to the contrary, she decided the mitzvah of tefillin is so great and so high that she wore tefillin in defiance of the order of the chief rabbis. The Gemara discusses as to whether they objected, whether they were afraid to object, or they felt that she was so much an exception that she deserved the privilege, the sacred privilege of wearing tefillin, or some say they did object to her and advised her to stop it. But after she had already worn it and had fulfilled the desire in having this mitzvah added to her credit to a degree. At this point, we come to a new state of affairs between King Shaul and King David, which will continue with the next time. Again, Our point here is to show that ones who battle for the sake of Kiddush Hashem with confidence, with bitachon, and the power of Hashem ruling and deciding battles, we continue the Shir in Navi. After King David had slain Goliath the giant and had gained fame for himself, as we mentioned, he also gained the enmity of King Shaul, who was very jealous of him, and an evil spirit penetrated into King Shaul, a spirit that led him to commit acts that were inconceivable. After this victory, people came out to applaud King David, and in singing, they sang songs stating that King Shaul was great. He killed thousands. King David killed tens of thousands, meaning that praise for King David was higher than that of King Shaul, and King Shaul's jealousy reached an uncontrollable stage. That night, as King David sat in front of him, King Shaul suddenly reached for his spear and he threw it at King David. He missed him. King David felt that this must have been an error, so he stayed on and he threw it a second time at him. This time King David eluded the spear and fled. He felt very much hurt to why King Shaul tried to actually kill him. This was an actual attempt to kill. So King David fled. Nosson, the prince, the son of King Shaul, felt very badly about this because Nosson liked King David more than any person in the world. The Torah says that the ahava between Nosson and David HaMelech were incomparable, unparalleled in history. It was the purest ahava ever existing. And so Nosson praised King David in front of Shaul, trying to make peace with him. He pleaded with King Shaul as to why he tried to hurt King David. After all, he said, he brought you glory. He brought victory to the Jews. And so King Shaul swore that King David would not die. Note, again, we use the word King David, though he was not yet king. A king does not begin his reign until the former king dies. But, as we said, as a matter of respect to King David, who was one of the greatest tzaddikim of all time, we have to use that title. King David went out again and battled against the Philistines. He was victorious, and when he came back, again, King Shaul cast the spear at him, and despite his vow he would not try to hurt him, and again King David fled. He went to his home, and there, Michal, the daughter of King Shaul, was waiting for him. And King Shaul was told that King David was home. So he sent men to the house to wait outside and get him in the morning as he would leave. Michal lowered him through a window, a side window, and that's how he escaped. Meanwhile, she placed articles in the bed, covered it with a blanket, to pretend that he was still asleep there. When the soldiers came into the house, she told them that King David was ill. He was lying in bed. They came back to report it to King Shaul, and he said to them, "Bring him here with the bed." They returned to the home, and of course they found that there was nothing in the bed but ordinary articles. And King Shaul sent for his daughter Michal, And he asked her, what kind of a daughter are you? You see that I want King David so badly. Why do you assist him in escaping? And she said, well, he threatened to kill me. I had no choice. She figured that she'd better stay on the right side of King Shaul, so that in case King David would require her assistance later on again, she'd be able to help him. Meanwhile, King David went to Shmuel Hanavi, the prophet, and he hid out there for a while. Afterwards, he met with Nosson again, and they made a treaty, a pact between them to help each other. And King David asked Nosson again, find out what is wrong. Why is King Shaul so set upon killing me? Nosson said, I'll find out this time for sure. He went back home. There was a feast going on for Rosh Chodesh, the new moon, and at this feast he tested King Shaul and found that King Shaul was really sincere in his desire to kill King David. He reported this at the feast again. He spoke to King Shaul, pleaded for King David's sake, and this time King Shaul reached for the spear to throw it at Nosson. He did not throw it, but Nosson walked out in anger. He went and reported this to King David. They met in the field, and they left. They parted very sadly. Now, from there, King David went to the city of Noveh. That was the city where the Kohanim were located. The Kohen Gadol was Achimelech. He asked Achimelech for some help, giving him some food, since he was starving, actually. Achimelech said he had some warm chalas there, bread. And as for a weapon, he said, the only weapon we have here is the sword of Goliath. So King David took the bread and the sword of Goliath, and he felt that in order to be safe, he'd better go to the land of the Philistines, to Achish, the king of Gath, that was part of the Philistines. He'd be safer among the Philistines than close to King Shaul. He came to the city of Gath, and the Philistines were amazed. They couldn't believe their eyes. Here was their arch enemy King David, killer of Goliath. They had a chance to capture him alive. So they took him. They reported to Achish, we have captured the killer of Goliath. We have him alive. So Achish said to them, that's impossible. How can you capture one who is that courageous and that fearless? You ordinary soldiers to capture one who's so great? I won't believe it until I see it, but make sure that you are not mistaken. And they said, we're positive, Your Majesty, we'll bring him in. They brought King David into the throne room, and King David saw in his wisdom that this would be instant death. They wouldn't give him a chance. So he used a trick that became very widely spread in use later on, to this day, in fact. He came close to King Achish. He looked at King Achish with glazed eyes, and then he said, what a nice beard you have. And he started to pull the beard of King Achish. Then he ran to the grapes, started to pull them down too. They started to act like a truly insane person. Achish looked down in disgust and said, this is what you call King David? Do I lack morons in this palace? I have more than enough. Get this one out of here. You'll pay for this. And that's how King David escaped temporarily. So he stayed there for a while. Finally he came to the cave of Adullam. It was a place in Israel. And there 400 men came to join him as his band. These were 400 men who were all desperate. They were in debt. They had other problems, troubles. They joined King David out of desperation, and they formed his nucleus with his closest warriors for later on. This increased to 600 eventually. Now, the Navi, prophet God, came to King David and said to him, return to the land of Yehudah. That's where you belong. So he came to the forest of Cheres in the land of Yehudah. Shaul, meanwhile, was very angry at his servants, his slaves, his servants, his close followers, why don't you help me to get this King David? Are you trying to rebel against me just as he is? Well, one of them spoke up. This one's name was Doeg. Doeg was a very evil person who had been present in the city of Noveh when Achimelech the Kohen Gadol gave King David the bread and the sword. He spoke this Lashon Hara, evil slander against Achimelech. He told King Shaul that Achimelech was the one to blame for the escape of King David, because he fed him, he gave him weapons, so Achimelech should be punished. King Shaul called Achimelech to him, and he accused him of helping King David. He said, you assisted King David, you gave him bread, a sword. Achimelech answered, well, why not? Isn't he the son-in-law of the king, the intended son-in-law? Isn't he the one who helped you in battle? Could you call him a rebel? Could you call him anything but the greatest greatest helper, the highest person in your kingdom to bring you glory and victory? What's wrong with helping King David? Was I going against you by helping him, or was I showing my allegiance to you? And King Shaul said to him, you have helped my enemy, and for this you must die. So he turned to his general, Avner, general of King Shaul, and said to him, kill this man and kill his entire family. Avner stood back in shock. Avner, you recall, was a very powerful gibor, tremendously powerful. But he said, how can I lay a hand on a Kohen Gadol, a holy person? I'm sorry, but I must reject this royal command. I will not do it. King Shaul wasn't angry. He turned to Doeg and said, you have just trapped yourself, because you helped me with this Lashon Hara, but I still feel disdain for a person who speaks Lashon Hara, and so you're the one that will have to go through with it. One evil deed leads to another. I command you to kill Achimelech and his family. Doeg did not hesitate. He killed Achimelech, his entire family of 85 persons, except one young son of Achimelech, Eviasar, who escaped and fled to join King David. He became the Kohen Gadol afterwards, together with King David. Then Doeg proceeded to wipe out the city of Noveh. He killed every man, woman, and child in that city of Kohanim. This was the act of Doeg, one of the worst people in history. In fact, the Gemara states that there are very few people who are listed officially in the Torah as never getting to Gan Eden, meaning that they remain in Gehenna eternally. One of those is Doeg. So, from there, when Eviasar came to King David, he told him about this. King David was very filled with sadness, this tragic turn of events. And he said to Eviasar, I feel that I'm partially to blame for this, because I recall seeing Doeg there at the time. It didn't occur to me that this would turn out this way. However, stay with me. You'll be safe with me, and someday you'll be zocher to be the Kohen Gadol in the Holy Temple. From there, King David heard the news that the Philistines were going to attack the city of Keilah, that was part of the land of Yehuda. And now that he had Eviasar with the Choshen Mishpat, the chest plate of the Kohen Gadol, which has the letters on it that light up when speaking to Hashem, he asked in this Choshen Mishpat, message to Hashem, should I go to battle against the Philistines in Keilah? And will I be successful? The answer came back, yes, go, and you'll succeed. So he went to battle against them. He was successful. Meanwhile, he heard too that King Shaul had discovered his whereabouts. So he asked the chest plate, will the people of Keilah hand me over to King Shaul? And will King Shaul come to Keilah for me? The answer came back, King Shaul will come. As a sign that the heavenly answers always come back in order. He should have asked the question, will King Shaul come first, and then will the people hand me over? He got one answer. He was required to ask again, will the people hand me over? And the answer came back again, yes. So he fled to the city of Ziph. This was a continuous pursuit and chase between King Shaul and King David. King David fleeing from one city to the next, from one village, from one forest to the next, hiding out from King Shaul. Nosson came to Ziph first, met King David, and said to him, this was the last opportunity they had to be together. He said to King David, I know, I feel that you are going to be king, not me. I'm the prince, but you deserve being king more than I will. I ask you only that when you become king, allow me to serve you. The Gemara says there is a theory that this shows that Nosson, besides being so great a tzadik, so pure a person, it showed his extreme humbleness, his modesty. He was now the son of the king, and instead of looking forward to the honor of becoming king, he allowed this honor to pass on to one that he felt was greater than himself. Then they parted for the last time. As we'll see, they never had the chance to meet again due to ensuing circumstances. At this time, the Ziphim, the people of Ziph, reported to King Shaul that King David was hiding out there. King Shaul came to the city of Ziph with an army seeking King Shaul, and he had him practically surrounded, going around the side of a mountain, when suddenly King David was saved because a runner came to King Shaul and told him that the Philistines were attacking elsewhere. He had to withdraw. Otherwise, he might have reached King David and might have killed him. From there, King David went to Ein Gedi, it's a very famous village today too. And the report came to King Shaul again that King David is Ein Gedi. King Shaul came there with 3,000 men. He came to a cave, camped there. King David was aware of this, and he spotted him. He waited until he saw King Shaul all alone. He came over to King Shaul, who had left his coat outside this cave, and he cut off the corner of King Shaul's coat. He left then, and then he felt very sorry that he had done it. He regretted this very deeply, that it's not just to touch the person of a king, Jewish king, but even to touch his garment, to do a harm to the property of the king, he felt was a major crime. He felt very sad about this, and he called, from a distance, he called out to King Shaul. And he said to him, my dear father-in-law like a father, he said, why do you pursue me? What reason do you feel that I am your enemy? I have just proven to you, by cutting off a piece of your coat, that I had the chance to easily kill you. And yet, I did not touch you. I didn't even think. I didn't dream of doing this. So you see that my hands are pure. I'm not out to do you any harm whatsoever. Why, in turn, do you pay me evil for good? Why do you pursue one who is so worthless? I am no more than just a simple worm, as King David said in Tehillim, Anochi Tolas. I'm a worm, nothing better. That was the great modesty of King David, one of the three most modest people in history. He called himself a worm, meaning less even than an animal. And therefore he said, let Hashem be the judge between us. King Shaul saw this. He realized it. He raised his voice because he realized the truth. When this evil spirit left him, he could see the truth. He started to cry very deeply, and he said, but this is, he called King David and said, I know that you will become king. You deserve being king, and I am fully at guilt. I'm really guilty in pursuing you, and I will not do this any further. With this, he left. For a while, there was peace. Shortly afterwards, Shmuel Hanavi was nostalgic. He passed away. He mentioned once, the Gemara says that he was nostalgic at his own request. because he knew that King Shaul was destined to die. He did not want that his closest disciple, King Shaul, the product of his labor, his efforts, should die during his lifetime. This is the case of a mishakela, a woman who gives birth, raises a child, and chas v'shalom that child dies. All the effort is gone in vain. Here King Prophet Shmuel prayed to Hashem and said, take my life before that of King Shaul. For this he passed away at a very early age, the age of 52. After his estalpus, he was buried in the city of Ramah. Today is a very important spot close to Yerushalmi, where they visit the grave of Shmuel Hanavi. Now, following this, there was a story with a man named Novel. The word Novel, that was his actual name. Novel means disgusting. And the Gemara says that generally a person is given a name that fits his character, his quality, his nature. This man Novel had a wife whose name was Abigail, who was the other extreme, a tzaddikus. Novel was very wealthy, extremely wealthy, and King David had helped him sometime previously. So he asked, King David sent messengers to Novel asking him to contribute some food for King David's men, 600 men who needed food desperately. And Novel turned them down very bitterly, said, you are rebels, I won't have anything to do with you, starve. The men came back, reported to King David, and King David said to the men, gird yourselves, put on your swords, we're going out to wipe out this evil person. They got ready to be prepared, and they started to march on towards the hole of Novel. They had to go through mountain passes. Meanwhile, Abigail, the wife of Novel, heard about this. She quickly loaded a few mules with bread, wine, with fruit, with meat, large amount of provisions, and she began this ride towards King David. As she rode around one mountain pass, he was coming towards her, and as she saw him, she dismounted from her horse. She came before him, she bowed, and she said, please allow me to say a few words. My husband, Novel, has a name that describes him fully. He does not appreciate what you've done for him, and please allow me to take the blame. I was not there at the time your messengers came, and I'd been there, I would have surely given them all their necessities. Meanwhile, I brought this gift to you, and I beg of you, for your sake, do not proceed any further. Do not spill Jewish blood. Have faith that because of the evil act of Novel, Hashem will punish him himself. He'll die anyhow. Meanwhile, your hands will be pure for spilling Jewish blood. And since I am certain that you will become king, I ask that when you do, please think of your slave. The Gemara says that Abigail was a tzaddikus, sort of a prophet in a sense, prophetess, and she possessed, again, an unusual beauty, one of the rare beauties of all time. King David saw her, he heard these words, he said to Abigail, you have really saved me now, because I realize now what an error it would have been to kill Novel and his men, they're Jewish. Therefore, for your sake, I'm returning, and as you said, when the time comes, I will take care of you. Abigail returned home. She told Novel what had happened, and the Torah says that Novel's heart sank. He was filled with such a panic and fear, the fact that King David had come to kill him, that this fear led him into illness, and in 10 days' time, he died. Shortly afterwards, King David called Abigail and took her for a wife. Now, as is known in those days, it was permissible to marry more than one wife, and as we learn in the Gemara, a king was allowed a maximum of 18 wives. That was the royal number. 18 wives was the next one, and of course it's important to point out that the Jewish kings were tzaddikim. They did not pass that number, as we'll see next year in Gemara. For that reason, it's important to state, too, that Shlomo HaMelech naturally would not break that rule. The Gemara says, though we find in the posek, it seems that he did, the Gemara itself states that only a fool would say that King Shlomo, King Solomon, committed a sin, a crime there. There was something much deeper involved. By the way, we won't go into this in depth, but this novel, the Zohar Kodesh says that Rabbi Arizal says there's something very deep and hidden, a deep secret about Navo, which we cannot discuss. That's the words of Rabbi Arizal in the Zohar Kodesh. Arizal says that the time has come for us to discuss it. This is many years later. Arizal says that Lavan, the father-in-law of Yaakov Avinu, Lavan, who was a Russia, was very wicked, lived actually 3 times. That's why he was called Lavan. First time a Lamed is Lavan. Second time he was a Goy. He came back again a second time as Bilam, the Bays. And Bilam's evil was unsurpassed. Yet he did have one prayer that was said with earnestness, with sincerity. A tefillah that is said with sincerity, even if it comes from the worst Russia in the world, is not ignored in heaven. This much was granted him. His tefillah was, V'sehi achlisi kamohu, that he prayed that his end should be like that of the Jews. He should be zecha to be like the Jews, and therefore, as we said, Lavan, Lamed, Lavan, Beis, Bilam, and Nun was Nevo. Lavan came back a third time after Bilam as Nevo. He died as a Jew, but of course an evil one, because he still had that evil nature. His root was one of evil. This was the secret of Nevo. Despite this, we see that Nevo had a wife, Abigail, who was so great a tzaddikus that she was zocha to become the wife of King David. Now, after this case, the Zifim reported to King Shaul, that King David was there in their vicinity. He came to seek out King David. He came with Avner and 300 men. King David had as his generals 2 brothers, Yoav, a very powerful general, and Avishai, the brother of Yoav. Avishai was also very strong, and they watched King Shaul. They still were encamped. Avishai said to King David, we could sneak in and get at King Shaul while he's asleep. They stealthily crept over to where King Shaul was, and Avishai wanted to kill King Shaul. He was very loyal, fiercely loyal to King David. It meant nothing to him to do anything, give his life to King David. He wanted to kill King David, and King David cried out, Chas v'shalom, that we should lay a hand on the one who was anointed by order of Hashem, anointed as King of the Jews. If he is to die, let him die through the hand of Hashem, not through us. Meanwhile, we cannot touch him, but let us take his spear and his canteen. With this, we can again show him the truth, the facts. They stole his spear and canteen. They went up to the top of the mountain, and there King David called out. He had a very clear voice. Arizal says that King David's voice was very sharp, very clear, and very majestic. He called out to Avner, the general of King Shaul. Avner rose up. They were asleep at the time. Avner rose up very angrily and said, how do you dare to call out so loudly to awaken our king? And King David replied, you, Avner, loyal general of King Shaul, you and all your soldiers deserve death, because you have failed in your duty. You were derelict in protecting the king. You went to sleep instead of guarding the king. The king could have been killed. At that moment, King Shaul heard this. He heard this. So he called out, "Is that you, my son, King David?" And King David replied, "Yes, it is. And again, I ask you, why do you continue to pursue me? Why do you continue to chase one who is truly devoted to you, has never done you any harm, has never intended doing you harm? Proof, again, is I have your spear and your canteen of water. Couldn't I easily have killed you if I was your enemy? Do you need any further proof than this?" King Shaul began to cry again. He said, "You are very right, and you've proven to me more than enough about your loyalty to me. I promise you for the last time that I will never again seek to hurt you." King David said, "Send one of your boys up here, and I'll return your spear and your canteen. I don't want to keep any property of the king." King Shaul sent it. He sent it up, and he returned this to King Shaul. He sent the boy to return it to him, and from there King Shaul went home. He returned home, and as he said, he never again attempted to reach King David. Meanwhile, King David wasn't certain that King Shaul's word would be true. His life would still be in danger. And so he decided that he would definitely be safer with the Philistines. He would go to see the king of the Philistines face to face. Achish, the king of Gath, speak to him and convince him to be persuasive enough to convince him that he should allow King David to live in the land of the Philistines. He came to Achish, the king of Gath. He appeared before him and said, "I am King David. But I've come to you. The fact that I'm here should be proof enough. The fact that I've come here is only because I want to desert the Jews. I will not be with them anymore. It would be to your advantage to have one like me on your side. I ask only to give me a separate village where I can live with my 600 men, and I can do a lot to help you. Reveal the secrets of the Israelis, help you in your plans for battle. I know a lot of military secrets, and you need no further proof of my sincerity other than that I come to you to risk my life." His words were very convincing, and Achish was happy to have King David on his side. He gave him the city of Ziklag, a small village that was used exclusively for King David and his men. They settled there, and they stayed there remained there until after the final war, which King Shaul participated. While there, King David did not want to waste any time. "As long as I'm here," he said, "let's accomplish something. Let's use underground tactics, terrorist tactics, in cutting down, bit by bit, the size of our enemy." And so he reported to King Achish, very friendly manner, at a meal. He said, "I'm going to a meeting. We're going up north for a little hunting, a little visit." And so he accepted these words properly. The next day, Achish said to King David, "Where were you last night?" And he said, "We went up north, just on a march, a little hike." They said, "It's a shame you went up north, because down south there was a bloodbath. One of our villages was completely wiped out. We lost a lot of soldiers there." King David said, "Is that so? If I would have been there, I would have helped." He said, "Well, next week we'll go south. Perhaps we'll be attacked again." The truth was, of course, that King David had told him we're going north to mislead him. Meanwhile, he went with his men south. He wiped out this whole village of Philistines, came back and pretended to feel very sorry for them. The next week, when he told me he was going south, he actually went north. This time he wiped out a second village up north. He reported to the king, I went south looking for the enemy, I didn't find them. The king said, you missed the enemy because they were up north. He said, what a shame. So this went on without ever being detected. It was only some of the followers of Achish, the king of Gas, who felt they had a slight suspicion that King David could not really have deserted his people because he still maintained his pure religious attitude. It was only Achish who was completely misled and who felt a deep liking for King David. So he stayed on there. Now we must return to clarify one item about which Rabbi Arizal speaks at length, and something which must be instilled in every Jew's mind and heart. The question that is most prevalent for generations, one that strikes every Jew at some time, and the answer which is vital. Question, how come that the Torah states again and again that King Shaul was a tzadik gomer? Tzadik gomer is a complete tzadik without a sin to his name. How come that the day before his passing, when he spoke, he got a message from Shmuel the prophet from heaven? He said to him, the message was, you are a tzadik, you are going to rise up to the highest level of Gan Eden. How is it possible that a tzadik, so pure, so fine, so perfect, should dream even, should actually attempt to kill a Jew, not just a Jew, but King David, the greatest of all Jews at that time, one of the greatest of all time? How is it possible for any Jew, even an evil Jew, to commit murder, and especially for King Shaul to desire the death of King David through his own hand? How did he throw the spear, actually throw the spear with intent to kill? And therefore there are some who say that King Shaul was pure, but he committed sins. Chas v'sholom, that is, of course, the worst falsehood that can be said. Truth is that King Shaul was pure and was perfect. But as Rabbi Nachman says, we must point out that this same question could be asked about many different cases in history. The Torah testifies, that is, Hashem testifies to the purity of the sons of Yaakov Avinu. They were so pure that each one carried the name of Hashem upon him. How could these great tzaddikim, the fathers of the tribes of Israel, have actually physically attempted to kill Yosef HaTzadik, the holiest of all of them? How can we find later on, in later history, throughout history, that the greatest tzaddikim were pursued, were driven, or harassed by other tzaddikim? In later generations we find that the time of, even recently, the time of Baal Shem Tov, Baal Shem HaKadosh, father of Chassidus, the originator of Hasidim at his time, who were his mortal enemies, the leading rabbis of that time. We won't mention names, but names that are world famous. The leading rabbis of the Shulchan Aruch, who banded together with an attempt to put the Baal Shem HaKadosh in Cherem. Akar Rabbi Nachman himself had enemies among the great rabbis of the world. How come even today we find this enmity, this seeming illusionary enmity among great tzaddikim, among leading rabbis? The answer is that it is the duty of the Satan to try to stop the coming of Mashiach. There's one thing that will bring Mashiach instantly, and that is unity among the Jews. Unity can be only if all Jews will follow one leader, the true tzaddik. Mashiach could have come a long time ago if all Jews had turned to one single leader and accepted him. It is the work, the effort of the Satan, to his greatest advantage, to stop others from following a leading rabbi of the world. Now, how can he do this? He's got to create friction among the world leaders. How does he do that? How does he succeed in that? The answer there is that the Satan is an extremely learned angel. He is a fantastic lamdan. He is a sage, a scholar, the highest degree. He picks up his knowledge in heaven. And using his knowledge, his Torah knowledge, he injects a strong, powerful arguments into the minds of these adversaries, other tzaddikim, that they are performing a mitzvah in harassing, in driving away at this leading tzaddik for the sake of a mitzvah. This leading tzaddik is a chassid who is very religious, but he has strange ideas. They must be stopped. How to stop him is a question of a pikuach nefesh, to save the lives of other Jews from falling victim to these ideas, even if it means removing him from this world. It's not really murder, it's just sending him to Gan Eden that much more quickly. Meanwhile, rescuing others. This sounds very childish and very foolish, yet it is a fact that the part of the wiles, the scheme, the tricks of the Satan, he can poison the minds of the greatest people by using these Talmudic deep arguments to convince them. And with this, he does get to a point where he causes so much friction between the leaders of the Jews that the laymen then do not know which way to turn. They cannot tell which one is right. And therefore there are many who say that if these great leaders, rabbinical leaders, argue among themselves, and none of them are right, they turn away from all of them. This is the victory for the Satan. And therefore Arizal says that a person whose mind is pure would never see these things. Let's take the true path of a person with pure emunah. He learns about these things, the act of King Shaul, for example, against King David. And his attitude would be, King David was a tzadik, King Shaul was a tzadik too. What happened there is something that is hidden. We cannot grasp the meaning of this action. King Shaul throwing a spear is something much more deeply than what the words mean. But I firmly believe that both were great tzaddikim. The act of the brothers against Yosef HaTzadik, there was something pure involved. The fact that this was the will of Hashem, the Jews should go to Egypt eventually. Something very pure. It sounds like something wrong, but it isn't. We just don't understand it clearly. The act of all great tzaddikim and the battles, the confrontations with other leading tzaddikim, we don't understand them. We know only that they all were pure, they were all great. If a person feels that way, then he himself shows that his mind is pure, that his faith is pure. But if a person begins to feel deeply within himself or subconsciously a feeling of rejection of these tzaddikim, he should know that there is a deficiency in the quality of his faith. And that is why Rabbi Nachman says that if a person begins to doubt tzaddikim because of these battles, because of this friction among them, he should know this is a message from heaven notifying him that he must cure himself from this shedet shebemayach, a leprosy of the brain. His mind is poisoned. He does not have the emunah tahara, the pure faith he's supposed to have, and this is a means of notifying him. He feels there's something wrong. Among great tzaddikim, there's nothing wrong there. There's something wrong within his mind and within his faith. It's a message for him to see to it, to purify his own faith, and that is done. The best manner is to, in the follow to pray to Hashem, be a spedulus, probably to Hashem and beg, plead before Hashem that his mind should become purified, that his faith should become stronger, that he have an implicit faith in Hashem and in all tzaddikim. This is the reason for his seeing, his feeling, what he thinks is wrong among great tzaddikim. The person could reach that level, where in his eyes all tzaddikim are holy. Every one of them is pure. Then he knows that his emunah is pure in Hashem too. Then he can feel proud that when he says, I believe in it with implicit faith in Hashem, in the words of the Torah, that his statement is a true one and accepted in heaven. because always these two go together, they cannot be separated. Faith in Hashem and faith in tzaddikim are one. Just as faith in Hashem and faith in the Torah, the word of Hashem, is one. And that is why, again, we say, and I want this with a record, for our record, future record in heaven, that King Shaul was a tzaddik gomor. Whatever happened in this story is something we cannot fully grasp. It is something heavenly, but physically, materially, King Shaul was perfect in his tzidkus, as the Torah itself testifies, and he was a Ben Shona b'mocho. He was as pure as a child. He achieved the highest level of kedusha, as testified by Shmuel Hanavi. So that King David and King Shaul were both fit to be called Malchei Yisrael, the kings of the Jews. Let's strengthen ourselves, fortify ourselves with this Amulat Tahira in the tzaddikim amitiyim, and in this sechus we will certainly merit seeing the coming of Mashiach, being in Beis Hamikdash, Amen. Amen. Amen.